Well, welcome everybody to another edition of Tough to Talk About. Once again, I'm your host, Mark Feinberg, along with my amazingly brilliant and talented co-host, Elaine Armstrong.
Woohoo! I love that. I love that intro. I need to take you on the road with me like every day when somebody introduce me. Let's say, introduce me.
I'll be your hype dude.
I love it.
Yeah.
You know, when everybody needs a hype dude, hype man, hype woman. You know, hype
Absolutely.
friend. Yeah.
Absolutely. And today is a very special day. And I have a dear old friend who's with us today, Jeff Romig. Jeff, you want to say hi?
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
And Jeff and I have known each other for many, many years in different aspects of life, business, and we actually, I think our offices were in the same building for a period of time, and just a really good guy. And coming off the heels of the last episode, which we talked about my own battle with depression, Jeff actually recently authored a book. And the name of the book is Don't Fucking Kill Yourself. And being that it's Mental Health Awareness Month,
That's right.
and being that obviously depression and suicide are so interconnected, I thought it would be a really good idea. We thought it would be a really good idea to have Jeff on the show. Really, the book is, and I'll let Jeff talk about it more, but Jeff lost his dad to suicide in 1996. Jeff has suffered from various mental health challenges similar to myself. Jeff has also, been affected by the loss of his father, obviously. And we would love to hear more from Jeff in terms of why he wrote the book.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very powerful book. So we'd love to hear from Jeff as to, what got him to a point of writing that book, what his purpose is and was for writing the book. I know from knowing Jeff and talking to Jeff, but his story is quite amazing, and the impact that he's trying to have in terms of depression and anxiety and suicide is one we need people like Jeff out there speaking about their own stories and how they've coped and how they continue to cope and the impact of depression and suicide. So Jeff, I'd love to turn it over to you and
Sure.
and just have you talk about, your background and your experience and how you got to the point where, and one other side note, I don't think I've actually ever heard Jeff curse. And then, and then he wrote a book called Don't Fucking Kill Yourself. So
Yeah.
there's something to that too, that I would love to hear more about.
Yeah. You're good at intros. Thank you. That was great. I mean, I'll say, one thing I think I appreciate you saying, I'm a good guy. I think the point at which on November 29th, 2017, I think there would have been a lot of people that would disagree with you on that. I had a rough stretch for a couple years before and through a divorce, and my alcoholism accelerated, and I was not in a great place, and I was not being the person I wanted to be, and hurt people I cared about. And that Wednesday in late November of 17, I was confronted with my bad behavior, and took that feedback very seriously, to the point that night I was the closest I'd ever come to suicide. But I was able to get through that dark moment, and the next day I was able to reach out to my college roommate, one of my best friends, who's been sober since 2001. And I told him, I said, look, not everything is about drinking, because I'm a binge drinker and I don't drink every day, but I know a lot of my patterns, of bad decisions are connected to drinking. And, I think I may have a problem, and I want to come talk about it. And so I went to visit him that weekend in Charlotte. And he took me to my first meeting that Sunday. And, I'm coming up on June 3rd, I'll be 4.5 years sober, and through AA, which isn't for everybody, but works for me.
Well, hold on, Jeff. I don't mean to interrupt you, but can we stop and like celebrate like that? Like I feel like a lot of times people say stuff and we breeze through it, but congratulations. Like that's huge. Like I don't want to.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, like that. People don't understand if you haven't battled addiction, or you haven't overcome, like how hard that can be. And so let's stop and give this man his flowers, right?
Well, I appreciate that very much. And I try to, I'm a very milestone driven person. Not in terms of achievement necessarily, but in terms of just memory. And the whole book is about time and about memory. And so, that's why, I mean, every month when it's the 3rd, because my anniversary is December 3rd, I think about, I've got another month, but the reality is, like, it's every day. And, I'm at a point now where personally I'm well past, the desire to drink. But I'm also like, still struggle in all kinds of ways. I mean, the first step is, our lives have become unmanageable and we're powerless over alcohol. But my life is unmanageable and I'm powerless part still every day, but it's just other things, it's not, luckily it's not substance related anymore. And therefore I'm not creating acute pain for others, which is what I wanted to, that's what I wanted to change. And, not just wanted, that's what I had to change. That's what I decided I would stay alive to change. And so, and
let me add to one more thing there. I want to double down on the celebration and the applause. Two, it's a saying that Dr. Gabor Mate, who is he's become a renowned addiction doctor specialist. He talks about how addiction is an attempt to solve the underlying issues. It's not the issue itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I myself have not had substance issues. I've had other addiction issues. And all of them are driven in trying to mask and or cope with whatever the word is, the underlying pain.
Yeah. And fill this void inside ourselves that, no amount of alcohol or gambling or eating or codependence or any of the different, things that there's 12-step programs for, we can't fill those holes inside of ourselves. And until we do the work that's needed. And I think it's, the people that I see in the program that I encounter that work programs that I would like to work are the people that have the most courage to engage with their own minds. And I think that's where that's hard.
It's scary.
And frankly, it's easier for me to come on a podcast or have a conversation than it is to sort of engage with my own mind all the time. And that's where, my depression takes over and I get lost in that. And I, can live this sort of these zombie stretches in my life that, again, make up way more time than I wrote about in the book, but those are only so interesting. They're not interesting at all, but they're very, paralyzing but people I see in the program that have the strength, the wherewithal to really do the emotional work and have the courage to face off against their own minds, are the people that work the program that I want to work and that I strive to work.
Yeah, and I think also people like you, I mean, you're whether you want to admit to this or not, you're public facing. People know you. You're well respected. And I know from what I understand about your dad, he never let on that he was suffering.
No,
And
no.
um
And I think that's the interesting thing about deciding to get sober for me. When his life was unmanageable, he ended it.
right.
And when mine was unmanageable, I asked for help and got on another path. And if I was ever on his path, which I really believed I was before I read the book, now I see that I maybe never was. That was a point of divergence, fork in the road, where I was able to concretely say, I was faced with the same kind of or similar unmanageability and made a vastly different choice.
How much of that choice do you think was um because you saw the impact that his passing had on you and other people around you, and you were just hell bent on not going that same way? Or was there something?
I mean, if I'm
Was there
being
something
100%
else?
honest, I would only say a little bit.
Okay.
And I think that's why we see suicide repeat in families, because even when you have that,
Mm.
the what's happening in our brains is so powerful that even with that experience, so I would say it played a role, but it was, I think more than anything,
Yeah.
it was the fact that, I was diagnosed with clinical depression and generalized anxiety disorder in 2002. So 6 years after he died, I finally got a diagnosis, even though I'm sure I was struggling with those same things well before he died, as a teenager. But with 15 years in 2017, at that moment, 15 years of acknowledgement, understanding, therapy, meds, like all these different things, may again not done perfectly by any means, but 15 years of all of that, and I still ended up at that place. And I think that that's what fascinates me about my dad is, he was 47 when he died. I'm 44 now. And when I think about, what he must have been going through to struggle with the pain that comes with these diseases and have had no medicine and no therapy and no
I can't imagine.
acknowledgement. I genuinely can't imagine the pain he was in. And I think that's not something that I really took time to consider before I spent the time to do the work, the personal work, not just the writing work, but the personal work, to write the book. I came away from that experience, and really came away from the first draft. So about November of 2020.
How much did your contemplating suicide in 2017 have a role in writing the book?
It had a big role, yeah. And but I think when I did the work, I came away with a new version of him that was a guy in his 40s that was struggling, rather than like being his victim. Like I was just able, with time, with the work I had done in Alcoholics Anonymous, for 3 years, before that, at the point that I was almost 3 years, at the point that I was finishing the first draft of the book, I had the tools now to do that work. So, I think it took me being so close to my own suicide attempt, but it also took me getting sober and the tools that I found in sobriety, to be able to do the personal work that it took to do the book. Because a lot of it, the way that the book is structured, for those who haven't read it, is I had always been really haunted by literally what my dad was thinking when he was waiting to die. So he did the carbon monoxide in the car thing.
Yeah.
And based on rudimentary research by me for the book, the best I could find is that with concentrated carbon monoxide, it would take about 5 minutes to lose consciousness. I'm more than happy to be corrected on that, but there is some time between, when he closed the door to the car with it running and he lost consciousness. And so I'd always been haunted by, in those moments, what was he thinking about? And why wasn't it enough to stop? And then combining that idea with the theory that our lives flash before our eyes when we die. The original construct for the book was, what would I see from my life if my life flashed before my eyes? And so the book is told, each chapter is based on a date, and it's told out of order because I don't think we'd see our lives flash chronologically. So there is a full story arc for the book, but it does jump around in time from chapter to chapter. And so, and it's my story, some of which is about him, a lot of which isn't. Although, certainly from the moment I read his suicide letter hours after he died, I've had a version of his voice in my head. What I learned through the book writing process is it was my version of his voice, which for a long time pre-sobriety, it was just his voice. I didn't even consider that it was a version. It was his voice that, took me to places around the need to prove myself and, my relationships with others and not trusting people. And that led to so many of the problems that I experienced in my life pre-sobriety, that I still experience. I just have more tools now.
Sure.
So Jeff, what, if you can express, and if you're comfortable, what happened? I don't know if it was day, I don't know if it's night. What happened in 2007 that, was there some flash when you were flashing? Did you what was that thing that stopped you?
2017.
2017, yeah. And
if there was one thing,
it's hard to say there was one thing, but it was, I'll say it was two things, one that's ridiculous and one that's not. I think, or two sets of things. One set of things was just, thinking about, positive things I'd experienced, and thinking about those memories, I think pulled me back from the mindset enough. Just because, again, I think perspective is a tool. And if we can get ourselves in a place where we have a little perspective on to get us out of our own heads, then we can start to come back from that ledge. So I think there were memories and things like that, thinking about family that was perspective in a way that pulled me back from the edge a little bit. And then the silly thing is, it was a Wednesday night, and Survivor is one of my favorite television shows. And I was like, as I basically had decided I was going to do it after Survivor. And then after I watched the show, I was like, well, I want to know what's going to happen next week. So, but again, I think it's enough,
Survivor.
Yeah, I mean, how ironic is it that
the
show
ironic.
you were watching, was the name of it was Survivor?
Exactly.
I've watched Survivor. Everything has a purpose,
it does. And I've watched Survivor
huge.
since it came on in 2000, and it's definitely a part of my life. I love the social strategy, which connects back to I worked in, I was working in politics at the time in 2017, and had off and on over the previous 10 years. And
Well, I think one of the things you do talk about in the book is in terms of focusing, back to the question that Elaine asked, like, what was it
yeah,
that kept you from doing it? Those positive
Yeah.
thoughts about your life. It sounds like, since then too, and you put a very heavy emphasis on just focusing more and more on the positives of life and leaning into those things, which for people who are going through depression, and I could understand this, it's not always easy.
no,
And I go to lots of therapy, and lots of people go to a lot of therapy to, cognitive behavioral therapy to hopefully reprogram our minds as best we can, right?
yeah,
To your point, like to think about your dad without all the things that we've tried, therapy and medicine and meditation and breathing and,
yeah,
a long litany of things that we try, and then one day it works and then the next day it doesn't. And you have to constantly be battling against, I call it the formula, and everybody's formula is different.
yeah,
And,
Yeah.
that's true.
but definitely, looking for those things to be grateful for, and looking for those, and it's not a panacea.
Mhm.
It's not, for the listeners, like, if you're feeling a certain way and you just flip a switch and you just start thinking, right, like, that's the challenge. We wish we could,
Yeah,
like, we wish there was that switch,
yeah,
but
Yeah.
it
and
does sound like in your case, like, really leaning in to just those positive memories and those positive thoughts. And, I know that's something that I need to do more of, because
yeah,
I've had plenty of positive things happen in my life, but my chemical imbalances and, the depression, um, it lies to you,
yeah,
right?
it
And
does.
sometimes you need to be reminded by people, and eventually, hopefully yourself, that
Yeah,
there's some positive out there, though it's hard. It's like a salmon swimming upstream. It's not natural. Our brains in general want to go negative, and then depression, takes you to a whole other darker level. But it does seem like that's played a really big role in coping and healing for you, is focusing on those positives, and continuing to do more of that. And I believe your book focuses a lot on that. Is that accurate?
yeah, absolutely. And I have a way that I say it now, that it was about halfway through the writing process before I landed on this. But it's the book is about the people, passions, and experiences that make me who I am. And some of those experiences have been painful and some have been joyful. But I had a great editor, a friend that I had brought on to help me out before I had a publisher. And he kept asking me, like, why are you telling this specific story? And I was getting so annoyed. But it forced me to really think about, like, why am I telling this specific story, and why do I want to tell it this specific way? And it's because it's like these things are sort of make up the puzzle kind of that is me. And then now looking at that is also a tool. And I feel like in 2017 I didn't have any tools. I feel like it was happenstance that I that light switch got flipped, to where I found myself thinking about people other than myself and memories, and that pulled me back from the ledge. But it wasn't that I was actively trying to, like, tap into tools. I didn't
Have any.
feel like I had any. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's also a big part of what I'm trying to do with the book and with talking about the book and my podcast, Suicide Survival Stories, is just contributing to a common toolbox. I mean, I'm not a medical professional, and my book is not a self-help book, it's a memoir. And the three tools that are sort of I want to contribute to the toolbox are, the first one is share and share often. I think that, talking about what's going on with you, but also talking about mental health, talking about suicidal ideation as a concept, or specifically, these things, suicidal ideation especially is poison. And the more that we do not talk about it, the more dangerous it becomes.
Yeah.
And so, so my first thing is share and share often. The second thing is connect with the people, passions, and experiences that make you who you are and bring joy to your life. And if you can do that, maybe it pulls you back from the edge. And then the last thing is the title of the book, which is Don't Fucking Kill Yourself. And it's not just the title of the book, it's a mantra. At the end of the day, if the first two don't work, like, say the second thing over and over, or the third thing over and over. And, and the thing about the title of the book is, it's not just an edgy title. About 10 years ago, or 10 years ago from when I was starting the book, somebody had said, if you can only say one more thing to your dad, what would you say? And that was my answer. And not because it's meant to be edgy, but because it's that serious. And so, so that became the title of the book. And it was never, even though my publisher had a person that I met with to like work on the title, that part of the title never changed. It was, and not just because I was insistent, but because they were like, it's great, let's keep it. We tweaked the subtitle a little bit, but so yeah, those are sort of the 3 tips that I want to contribute to the toolbox. I do not have all the answers. I am not fixed because I wrote a book, but I am trying to approach life in a more positive way and consider and not think of myself as broken as I had for so many years before I got sober and even since, and just trying to learn more about myself, more about my personality type, try to figure out what are the things within me that are hardwired, and, how do I turn weaknesses into strengths? And, but a lot of it is trying to be a more positive person. I think that, I think in my heart, I'm someone that wants to serve the community in positive ways. I've always had that pull.
That's how I know you.
Yeah. But it's that shadow self that you were talking about, which I call like the alcoholic version of me, it wants me to drink. It wants me to create chaos. It wants me to be negative. It wants me, to die. And, it's trying to distinguish the good part of myself from that part of myself. And, through learning and through adding tools and through being, less self-involved and more in tune with the needs of others, to have that be my focus every day. And I remember one piece of feedback that was conveyed to me in 2017 was like, Jeff acts like he wants to be this community servant, but if so, like, why does he hurt other people? And it's like, that's totally fair, but both things were true. I did have a heart for service, but my diseases and my alcoholism being untreated, I was not able to be the person that I wanted to be on a daily basis. The person that I was inside and who I believed I could be was not who I was being. Yeah. And that was why I wanted to die. And that was why, when I decided not to die, I wanted to change. It wasn't about
that. And sorry to cut you up, but I think that's a big, I think one of the things that, I've heard you say a few times, almost critiquing yourself as a person, like that's the bad side of you, or that
shadow self, right? Didn't you say the shadow self?
And I think that's I don't think that's true. And anybody who is an addict, right? The addiction is covering up pain, which is a very human thing.
Yeah.
to experience. And society, for the most part, teaches us not to show our pain. And then we resort to certain things. And it doesn't make, and I think there's a lot in what, you know, in this, like it doesn't make you a bad person. And you're suffering from pain, or anyone who, you know, again, suffering is part of the human condition. And we all turn to various addictions,
Yeah.
you know, distractions, addictions. And um, just like depression is a sickness, addiction is also a sickness, and it's covering up that pain. And I think I would hope that we could remove that, um, that beating ourselves up
Yeah.
around, you
I,
know,
I
because
tried to,
you know, again, I'm biased, but I don't see you as a bad person. I
well, I
see that,
appreciate that.
yeah. I mean, I
And
never have, and I don't think you are. And I think deep down you probably know you aren't.
yeah.
But we all have our things that we're dealing with, and I would hope that there's listeners out there that who might be struggling and viewing themselves as a bad person.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
heard behavior though. I didn't hear that though. You know what? It's funny. I heard we all behave badly. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, there are probably things I did today that probably weren't all that great. But I think I heard it was more what you were doing, not who you were.
Yeah, but I think it got blurry. And I think for
Yeah.
me, because of that, it got blurry. But, and what I'll say, I think this is another place where two things have to be true at the same time.
Mm.
Mark, what you're saying is true. When people struggle with addiction or disease, they are experiencing levels of pain that we might not know if we haven't experienced those things.
mhm.
And if they, through that pain, cause others to experience pain,
Mhm.
then that's true too.
It
You
is.
know, and so it's like everything you're saying is true,
Yeah.
but when I was in active addiction, and you know, other times in my life, like it wasn't happening in a vacuum, you know, it wasn't just happening to me, it was happening to others. And I think, you know, someone who means a lot to me and whose opinion I respect tremendously told me, and this was just like last year, reflecting on where I was in like 2016, 2017, that I wasn't just wearing my emotions on my sleeve. I was wearing unprocessed emotions on my sleeve.
Mm.
And, you know, when you exist in that state, you inevitably hurt people. People don't know what to expect from you. They're always on pins and needles. Being in your presence is toxic. And that's how I feel like I was in those times. And I feel terrible for that. And I feel, you know, and I hate anybody that I hate that I caused anybody pain to a small degree or to a greater degree. All I can do now is work hard to stay in active sobriety and continue to make living amends on a daily basis by not being that version of myself ever again. And what I decided in that moment that I was coming back from the edge that night was that if I die right now, I can never be better. I can never fix anything that I've done. It may feel bad right now and like it's the end of the world,
Powerful.
but if I go right now, it freezes. And if I stay, then maybe I can be better. Maybe I can make amends. I mean, I didn't think about amends in that. I didn't have that concept yet until I got into AA. I didn't have the concept of gratitude. Like I've learned so much that is part of my daily life that wasn't.
12 steps powerful. I mean,
Yeah. And so
it's powerful.
I think both things are true. I think that it's like we have to be empathetic to the people that are struggling, but we have to know that there are people that they are then causing to struggle. And like it's the whole hurt people.
Yeah.
And you know, and that's also something that I learned about my generational trauma is I learned more about my dad's relationship with his dad and his dad's relationship with his dad. And that apparently my great-grandfather was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And that was created, you know, the life and the approach that my grandfather took, my dad's dad. And then the approach my grandfather took created the approach that my dad took, you know. And when I was able to learn these things, again, it gives you perspective and gets you out of yourself. And it's like, I'm part of this generational pattern, and I don't have kids, but it's like, how can I be better to change that generational pattern? But I think the reality is like, even though each of those people hurt each of them in different ways, they were all trying to do their best.
Right.
You know, they weren't evil people. You know, but again, it takes a lot of work and tools and reflection to get to that point. For
Yeah, I
me,
mean, one of the things that I, you know, that during my own therapy and my own treatment and for my own codependency issues and isms, and they're rooted in various forms of childhood trauma and generational trauma, and there's addiction in my family, and when they, a lot of times I'll hear from various programs, and it's kind of what we're talking about here. And this is what makes you, Jeff, even more special than, you know, I already knew you were, right? Like the fact that you care about, you know, you don't want to do any harm to yourself because then you can't make amends. But one of the things that a lot of counseling centers and treatment centers will say, it's not your fault, right? It's not Jeff's fault that he was born into multi-generational trauma. It's not Mark's fault that he was born into multi-generational trauma. It's not, you know, I don't want to speak for Elaine because we haven't.
You might as well go, just add it.
Yeah.
Hey, we all have it.
Yeah. So, you know, it's not our fault, right? It doesn't let you off the hook necessarily, and just where you can point fingers and say, you know, there's a saying, it's like, it's not your fault. That doesn't mean that you're not empowered and in a position to change it, right? And to break the cycle of that trauma. So, you know, don't, not that you're on the show to get more motivation for being an amazing guy, because you are an amazing guy, but you know, the fact that you care about those things is commendable, truly. I mean, that you want to make amends. And I think for our audience, you know, who are suffering, I think it's that balance. And I think you could agree with this, Jeff. It's that balance of, there's a sickness, there's trauma, there is generational DNA that makes up some of these very dark thoughts and leads to things that maybe you're not proud of. And those things are not all necessarily your fault. And to be a little gentle on yourself, to recognize that in some way you've been dealt a bad hand. Now there's an opportunity to break that cycle. But I would hope that people are gentle, because I know, you know, I know when I've contemplated suicide, I'm just a bad human when I'm in those, you know, like I've failed everybody. You know, I'm just, everything's wrong with me when I'm in those moments. And I know through some of the work that I've done and I continue to do, like I can now have moments where I can say, I'm not perfect by any stretch, but I'm not as bad as what the darkness tells me I am. I'm not as bad as what the depression is lying to me about.
Yeah.
You agree with that?
Absolutely, I do. Yeah. And I think that's, you know, part of the journey I've been on, is that's part of the healing, is being able to see myself more accurately,
Mm.
more accurately, more consistently,
Yeah.
while also working to just be better. And it's the whole thing, like, when you know better, be better, and be a lifelong learner, and try to, if you keep learning and you put yourself in that mindset, and then as you learn, you try to be better, like, as human beings, like, that's what we can do, right?
And be kind.
Be
And
kind, yeah.
we Elaine and I are talking about other things that we can do to spread love and positivity. And one of the things that came up on a previous show was me putting my feet on the ground, right? Like, just certain days where it's like, celebrate the fact that we put our feet on the ground. And I think
Totally.
for folks out there who are listening, right, it's that every day. And I don't know about you, Jeff, but for me, as somebody who deals with depression, it's an everyday battle, right? Like, some
Totally.
days are better, some days are really bad, but they're it's a constant, right? And definitely, and hearing that similar from you, Jeff, it's focusing on those positives, focus on making amends to folks, and then also just working on the underlying pain,
Yeah.
which is really scary and really hard to do, because I continue to learn things about myself that scare the crap out of me. But hopefully it will reduce the amount of ideation that has come up throughout my life.
Yeah, I think that's part of, the idea that the only way out is through. Like, we have to, it comes back to whether it's something that's happening acute or something that's chronic. Like, if we can have the courage to face off against our own minds, and do the work, then, we'll grow our toolbox, and we'll get healthier. And, and if we're doing that, then, hopefully good things are to come.
Hey, Jeff, so we've been talking quite a bit. We've got to tell people where to get the book first. So can you do that for us and just let us know where people can get it? And I'm curious, just a quick question though. Have you read your book back? And if so, how many times? Like, I've always wanted to just ask people, like, do you read your own stuff? And does it change for you? When you read it back, is it different than when you wrote it?
I read it so much for, a long time, like between finishing the first draft Thanksgiving of 2020 and submitting the final draft, or finalizing it in like late August of 2021. I spent way too much time with it. So I honestly have not, since it came out in November, on November 2nd, I have not sat down with the paperback and read it. And honestly, because I'm terrified of finding some error that is going to bother me. But I think the reality is, like, I mean, the great thing about doing this is that no matter how my brain changes, because there's Alzheimer's in my family. I have captured a lot of memories, not only my own personally, but like family traditions, and so there's a lot of that in the book. And I think the reality is like, because it is a book, especially if you've read it once, picking it up and just reading a chapter, like, I intended it to be kind of isolated short stories. So I could definitely pick it up and, go read about this or read about that. And I'm sure I will at some point. I mean, to be honest, like, I started writing in late June of 20, and the book came out the first week of November last year. And like, after that, like, by the time I got to December, and, now I'm down to about like one podcast or so a month. I was just so immersed in it, and I just kind of crashed and needed, needed a break.
Separation, yeah.
Yeah, so it's definitely something I'm going to go back to, but I have not read it. I have not held the paperback and read the paperback. I have only read it like digitally.
Yeah.
So yeah, I need to do that. As far as where people can get it, it's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble. If you go into, I mean, my encouragement is to go to a local independent bookstore. If you ask them to search the Ingram catalog for my name, Jeff Romig, or the title, Don't Fucking Kill Yourself, fucking has an asterisk on the U.
Wonder why.
If they search the catalog, then they can order it for you and you can pick it up at the store. So in Atlanta, if you go to Acapella Books, if you go to Virginia Highland Bookstore and ask for it, they can order it from you, or you can get it on Amazon as an ebook, or or for not an ebook, but for Kindle. And then you can order the paperback and it'll be there in a couple days.
Well, I know we'll make sure that when we ultimately release the episode, that all of that information will be.
Yeah.
And then I have one final question, and then I think we can wrap up. So if there was one takeaway that you wanted a reader, that after they finished the book, they got through the entire book, what's that one takeaway you would want them to be left with?
I'm going to answer a slightly different question that will answer your question.
Yeah.
My favorite piece of feedback that I get is when someone says like, your chapter about your grandparents made me think of this thing with my grandparents, or you writing about baseball made me think of like growing up playing soccer. I tried to write the book authentically in a way where, with those sort of passions, people, and experiences, that I told those stories in a way that even if you didn't care about baseball, it could connect you with something similar, be it dance, be it NASCAR, whatever, that you care about with a passion. I tried to write about things, the things that I love, in a way that will hopefully connect you to things that you love. And so if people read the book and come away with that, because the whole thing here for me isn't like my story needs to be told. I wanted to tell my story so that in reading it, people can connect with their own stories and then have those people, passions, and experiences in their toolbox, in case they are experiencing dark moments of suicidal ideation. I wrote with a lot of fidelity to that very core audience of people that struggle with suicidal ideation, with the goal of sharing enough information that it could be informative to the people who love those people, and then trying to write an interesting enough memoir that if you're not in either of those groups, you still might find the read interesting.
Well, that's really helpful. That's really helpful. And as somebody who has suffered with depression and continue to, and also contemplated suicide, I can understand that, because one of the therapeutic exercises that I'm going through, well, I've gone through and continue to go through, and now lean in even more, is connecting to those things that really going back to childhood, like what did I enjoy? And trying to remember, because I don't remember a lot of those things, right? Like they've either been blocked out or covered below trauma or life, and just reconnecting. And it could be something as silly as Saturday morning cartoons, where now I'll sit in front of
the way, TV. Saturday morning cartoons are not silly. Like, can we bring that back? And
that's right.
I mean, who doesn't have good memories of that? I feel like that some of those things are small things that we need to go back to, and just because they brought us so much joy. And to your point, and I mean, we all, like, when you said that, everybody's nodding their head, but yeah.
Yeah, time to bring back the Snorks.
Oh, come on, like, hello.
Yeah. We just probably lost a good part of the audience, but you know,
no, we didn't. They're still there. They wish they were watching it too.
Yeah, if you don't know what the Snarks are, check them out. It's
Google it.
They'll cheer you up. So yeah, I mean, just even, I'll go out to YouTube and just watch the Snorks, right? Or watch cartoons.
And without the Snorks, there would be no SpongeBob.
There would be no SpongeBob.
Damn.
That's right.
There you go.
That's how you connect to the generation right below us, to the younger millennials, is the SpongeBob. That's the
Snorks were the SpongeBob of our generation.
Yeah, that's exactly. Right. Yeah. The Snorks were better than SpongeBob, though. Anyway, that is not why we're here. So y'all, everybody get the book. Check it out. Share this message. I think that you've dropped a lot of gems, Jeff. As you were talking, I feel like between you and Mark and the conversation, I'm just listening to the both of y'all, and just like I think there's so much that if you're listening and you're a person like me, that I've not tried to contemplate suicide. I haven't had an attempt or anything, but I feel like there's so much that you can learn, whether you are a person that has overcome depression, or you're fighting it every single day, or you're trying to put your feet on the floor, no matter where you are. There's so much that it was rich conversation here. So I would just appreciate the both of you for sharing. I'm so glad that you all are connected, and that's how we got the show together. And if Jeff, if you think of other folks, we know you're a podcaster too, but like, let's share the wealth. You think of other folks that we should be talking to, please let us know. Mark and I are just getting started on this thing. We're trying to figure it out and trying to spread more light into the world, and hopefully we're doing that through this through the message here. But we thank you for spending the better part of an hour with us talking about this. And one thing that we didn't do that we should probably do before we sign off is to talk about, we've been wearing, well, Mark started it, but because he had this cool t-shirt on, and I actually had to change because I didn't have a t-shirt on. I just had a boring work shirt on earlier. But talk about our t-shirts, because we've been trying to infuse some subliminal messaging. I guess it's not really subliminal because we've talked about the shirts on the show, so it's actually not subliminal. But Mark, I gotta ask you about your shirt.
Yeah, so my shirt today, so in previous episodes, there's been breathe, which is a reminder to myself and others not to remember to breathe, because sometimes we forget. Be kind. Again, I think kindness can go a long way. Mm-hmm. And today is for Mental Health Awareness Month. And yes, I will be wearing this shirt all month, so don't come near me.
All you gotta do is wash it.
Yeah, well, let's move on. It's mental health is health. Again, it's we're hearing that more and more, thankfully. Not enough. But hopefully, as people like Jeff and others are out there openly talking about the challenge of mental health, that it will be viewed as consistent with other sicknesses and illnesses and diseases. So mental health is health.
That's right. Yeah. So
and how about your shirt?
Yeah. I guess you can see it all in here. It's the shirt that is the brand for the boxing gym that I go to. The name of it is A Fighter for Life. And obviously the fighter part comes from the boxing part, but it really, the coach that I have, Rahman Ali, he's an amazing person, but it's all about being a fighter in everyday life. And no matter what you're doing, you have to fight. And so you know, so when I think about the brand, obviously you got to fight in so many things, but you also have to fight just to live. And I think that to me, I was like, oh, this shirt was pretty cool. And just you know, give a shout out to the vision that he had when he created the name of the brand, which I think is super cool. So so yeah, we all have to be every day. His tagline every time he signs off on a video or something is you know, now and you know, ever, you have to be a fighter for life. So we've all got to fight for life.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm wearing a Rock polo shirt, but I would love to take the opportunity, since I don't have a shirt to talk about,
Yes.
to make to say one more thing.
Please.
One question that I've gotten a lot, that this is not in the book, but a question I've gotten a lot from, you know, that group of people who don't experience suicidal ideation necessarily, but do have loved ones and are trying to talk to their loved ones about suicidal ideation. You know, I've been asked a number of times, a great deal actually, you know, how do we talk to our loved ones who, you know, express that they think about suicide? And, you know, I think one thing that's really true that we need to get more in the public consciousness is talking about suicide is a spectrum. And on one end, there's suicidal ideation, which could legitimately just be like, my dad died by suicide, therefore I think about suicide. That doesn't mean I'm in danger, it just means that I think about suicide. And the spectrum can go to being suicidal, which is where danger is present. And I think that, you know, a lot of times when someone you love, if they are willing to say, I think about suicide, the biggest thing keeping most people from saying that is how the other person is going to react. And so, because even if you say, I think about suicide from, you know, the safe end of the spectrum, they're very likely going to hear it from the danger end of the spectrum. And oftentimes we project our fear onto the situation and accelerate it versus, you know, figuring out how to have a dialogue. Because the reality is that most people who think about suicide don't necessarily want to die. They don't want to live the way that they're living. And they may not, because they're having this one-way conversation in their head, they may not have really explored that. And asking them questions can help them explore that out loud, which again takes away the power of the ideation. The more the ideation is in our brains in a one-sided conversation, the more it becomes poisonous. So the more that we as society can, unless there is danger present, and we see that, if we can not create danger, you know, by projecting our own fear onto a conversation, then I think more people will be willing to talk about suicidal ideation, because they, you know, people are scared. What are you going to think of me? Are you going to take me to the hospital? Like, depending on how old you are. There's lots of fear involved with letting these ideas out of our mouths. I mean, to the point that, like, I have talked publicly about my mental health challenges for more than 10 years for sure. And on social media and things like that. It was 3 or 4 months into writing the book in 2020 that I ever used the phrase suicidal ideation in relation to myself publicly on social media. And so, and it's such a fear-based thing to not want to share that. But the reality is the more that we don't share, the more it becomes poisonous.
It becomes that perpetuating stigma. I mean, I'm the same. I mean, I've talked about pieces here and there, but it's just been recently that I've been talking more about suicidal ideation. And I think I read somewhere recently, you know, I don't know if the statistics are accurate, but, you know, that 90% of, I think, like 30 and above in terms of age have had suicidal ideation. And if that's the case, then clearly we're not talking about it enough. And where if we did, you know, how many suicides would we prevent, because it would go from, ideation to conversation
Right.
instead of actual suicide. So,
Totally.
I love the spectrum part of that too. I mean, I feel like that was a really, when you said that, that really hit home, because
mm,
I mean, I can identify with that right off the bat. I mean, you think about things, and I think that's so key. That it's
Yeah.
not just you're ready, like you're getting ready to harm yourself. Like there are levels and
Mm.
layers to it, which is wow, that's great. I'm so glad, Jeff, that you stopped us before we stopped to add
Oh,
that point
absolutely.
in.
And
Yeah,
I think the caveat is, like, obviously there are people in positions that they are mandated reporters, and
yeah.
and and some of these tools get a little blurrier when you're talking about teenagers and younger kids, where that's a place I don't necessarily have the answers, but where there's adult conversation happening, adult to adult, and danger isn't present.
mm.
I think there's a place for all of us to, take a different approach potentially, and and not project our own fear onto somebody else and
Yeah, I'm glad you brought
exacerbate it.
that up. I'm
Yeah.
glad
That's
you
a
brought
that's
that
a
up.
whole nother episode when we
It
get to
is.
that part, especially when you're talking to parents. Woo,
Yeah.
that's a whole that's a whole different ball game. So now you've given us fodder for another episode.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you
Yeah.
brought that up. Well,
Wow.
more
We
than
could go
great.
forever, but we gotta wrap this thing up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
you've been
thank y'all
more
so
than
much.
gracious. And
Yeah. We gotta get you. We've taken a lot of your time, Jeff, but we just reserve a spot in your calendar at some point in the future for us to circle back to you.
I'm happy to talk and share. And like I said, I think it's, the biggest thing I think everybody needs to remember is that we all struggle in different ways. And, like I said, just because I wrote a book doesn't mean that, I've stopped struggling. It's still a daily thing. And, and some days are better than others, but, like I said, I have more tools now, and I will work to continue to build my own toolbox and share those tools with others so that we can all support each other, and struggle less and find more joy.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Truly.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us. We appreciate your time. If you stuck with us, and save this, share it with a friend, and we'll be back on the next one. We'll see you next time.
Take care.